Bob, we're going to start with I Compete, and what part of the book did you focus on for this lesson?
Well, you know, John, since we're talking to and about CEOs and how to be a more successful CEO, it seems to me that what all of us as CEOs have in common is we all realize that nothing is ever what it seems, and things are always more expensive than we thought they were going to be, and then sometimes it works. And it seems to me that a way to minimize those three things happening is to have discipline in growing your brand as a CEO. And discipline really means a way of doing something, whether it's washing dishes where you could have 5 ways to wash them, but you pick one that everybody's going to use, or 2, and getting in shape or whatever it is, you have to have a way of doing something. And I know you'll love this because you always like the fact that I do some research, but discipline comes from the Latin disciplinus, which does mean a way to accomplish something efficiently and effectively. And so I was thinking that on page 166 of your book, I Compete, it has what you call in the book John's 10 napkin commandments. And so I thought that people can look at this later in the book, because I'm hoping everyone has a copy of I Compete, and ask themselves, of these top 10 that you have on John's 10 napkin commandments, how many do they think would help them be a better CEO? And if they don't like some of them, what would they replace them with? And then once they decide what their top 10 are, to make a commitment to themselves to implement them without exception. So what I thought I'd do is read through these 10 and then give you the opportunity to comment on what happens when you do and don't stay faithful to them. And so those of us who are listening, I'll take about 3 minutes to do this in case you want to just jot some notes down. So number 1 is keep control of company stock. Number 2, get rid of people with bad attitudes more quickly. 3, only go into cities, markets, where we, the company, can achieve critical mass the first year. 4, set minimum requirements for franchisees. 5, will always be the first or second largest in number of returns per office. 6, don't open new offices until over 90% of existing offices are successful. 7, give free franchises. 8, purchase existing businesses. 9, use free coupons much more extensively. And 10, keep a satisfactory cash reserve. So if you'd like to comment on your vast experience in the 2 companies, and the one that you worked for before you started the 2, and now this one, Loyalty, what would be your comments on your own top 10?
I have a lot of comments, and let me start with this: that our goal is always to have the best system of business in the industry, and to have the best system, it has to be evolving and improving. And so that was the top 10 when we started, but evolved into we called it a top 10, and there were 14, because we learned and improved along the way. And I felt I was entitled to call it the top 10, since in Big Ten football, for most of its life, there were more than 10 teams in the Ten conference for Big Ten football. So I thought I could steal that. So those are, it's important to identify the most critical things of success. That if you could narrow it down to, and I think you can in our industry, or in the tax industry rather, if you can narrow it down to 10, 12, 14 things. If you do that right, you can't lose. And you can screw up a lot of other things. But if you get the top 10 things right, you're going to be successful. And so my goal was always to make it simple. You know, Einstein said, genius is making complicated things simple. And so that we're always striving to make it clear and concise and simple for our franchisees and employees. And that's a big reason why we grew so quickly in all of our companies. Now, several people have told me, I think even yourself, that it's rare for companies to come up with the top 10.
Absolutely.
And I think that there are certain things you need to look at each and every day to see if you're getting it right, and certain results you need to get at each and every day. In the tax industry, it's real simple. It comes down to how many customers did you have today? How many hours of labor did you have? And how much did you charge? How much were your fees? And it's amazing to me, after bringing in 5,000 franchisees and calling hundreds and hundreds of franchisees trying to help them, that they didn't have their finger on the pulse of those three numbers. This is, this isn't complicated. Success isn't complicated. It's certainly not easy. It's very difficult, but it isn't complicated. It's you can break it down into common components.
Aren't those three things common to Amazon too?
Probably every company has the same similar three things.
I mean,
Because,
those specific three things, right? How many customers did you have? What was the labor? What's the revenue?
if you get that right, then you're going to, in virtually every industry, right?
And then the other key that you have in that fourth one is how many are retained and are fanatical.
Exactly. And what I've told I've told this over and over again, out of the 5,000 franchisees that I brought in, not one followed the top 10, did a good job on all the top 10. The extraordinary franchises would get do 95% or 96 or 97% of what they were follow the system. But if you didn't follow 90%, you could fail.
John, one of the things that struck me as I was suggesting these 10 on the napkin, which are 14, is even more simplistically above the top 10, which are really strategies and tactics, is the focus that you have right now in loyalty, which I think would benefit all of the CEOs on this call, is how you have, if we can structure this, you have your vision here, and then you have three strategic imperatives that have to work. Locations open, number one, followed by happy, and with a comma, successful franchisees. And if you're not a franchise company, it's happy, successful leaders and managers of your locations. And third, fanatical fans. And if any of the CEOs on this call, because if you're not growing, you're going out of business, whether you know it or not. And if you don't know where you are in terms of growth and whether your competitors are growing or not, and you're always keenly aware of what's going on with your competitors. So you've got to grow, locations open. You have to have happy, successful franchisees or location managers, and they have to create fanatical fans, as that's the only way you grow. And I'd like you to comment on that relative to the top 10, because those 10 or 14 are really strategies and tactics for the other three.
Yeah, let me drop into a kind of since we're talking about building a brand,
Mhm.
not just building a company, we're talking about building a brand.
Yes.
And so it's a state of mind. And I'll give you some examples that may seem silly, or but always thinking about building a brand. And even if you're a national company like I've formed, building a brand's obvious,
Mhm.
right? But in each of our franchisees' case, they're building a brand in their own neighborhood. This is a neighborhood by neighborhood battle. And
Yes.
if I'm in Bronx, while it is a little important to me that we have that we're known in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New Orleans, and what I have to do is win my battle in my neighborhood. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things that I did that I do and did on a national level to build brand. But everyone needs to be thinking about this on a local level, and we can talk about some examples of that too. You know, my competitors have often said of me that I'm a shameless self-promoter, and that's true. That's true. I am. I'm. You know, I'm about building brand, and whatever that takes in terms of getting national recognition. So when one of our franchisees or employees or a customer brings something to our attention that's extraordinary, we need to share that. We need to share that, and we don't do a good job of communicating our victories, even our little victories, to the rest of the world. And it's about my success in building brands has been because I've been able to convince everyone involved of the vision that I had. And it had to be an accurate vision. There had to be an opportunity. For example, when I competed with Block, there were 9,000 H&R Blocks when I started, and we had 6 Mel Jackson / Jackson Hewitts. So, and the second biggest competitor in the country had 200. So when I was building brand, I talked about that opportunity. I talked about that vacancy. I talked about the fact that wherever there's an H&R Block and there's not one of our offices, then there's a vacancy sign hanging up, and we are going to teach you to get into that market and into that neighborhood and grow to be as big as they are. And we're going to teach you the system and the strategies and the methods for being number one in your neighborhood. And it looks like you want to say something.
I think one of the things that people miss about how you grow brands is that, for instance, your existing franchisees, now this is under number 2, happy, successful franchisees. Your existing franchisees, and tell me if I'm wrong about this and amplify it if it's right, bring in their friends and family and other people, like when Kelly Wyatt was on and talking about how many people came from a church or whatever social group they belong to. But the companies that we worked for and helped in Management 2000 never really exploited, in the best sense of that word, the enthusiasm their franchisees had for being a franchisee, to get them to share with other people. And Great Clips did that, but it's one of the few companies that did that, but you even did it better than that. Is that a true statement, that that's one of the success secrets, if you will?
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that it's important. And you know, I used to feel a little bit insulted when people would, because there's always winners and losers and average in terms of people, franchises, employees, CEOs. And people used to say that, oh yeah, that person was successful because they drank the Kool-Aid. And for many years, without putting a lot of thought into it, I was kind of insulted by that. And then I realized that it was necessary, if you're going to be massively successful, to follow the system and to implement everything that's worked, because it's our job as franchisors and leaders to give you our experience as to what works and doesn't work. Our job is not, so many CEOs and leaders or attempted leaders make the mistake of inventing things.
Yeah.
And they come up with ideas that and why do you should do this without having tried and true. So what is necessary to create success is to find out what works and then regurgitate that to the entire system. And in my life, and this happens with franchisees too, and a lot of my franchisees, certainly the best ones are the same, that I tell people I work 365, and they probably look at me with kind of disbelief a little bit, but then I go on to explain that every single person in my family was either an employee, a investor, or a franchisee, or all of the, or some of all the above. So I can't go to a holiday event where there isn't conversation about what's going on in business, because I brought them along. And the people that drink the Kool-Aid are just so happy to shout it from the rooftops. And they bring in their brothers and sisters and best friends and fathers, sometimes fathers and mothers. You know, we had Eric Van Horn on in one of these calls about 7 calls ago. He brought in his father and mother. He was a unit franchisee in Kansas City. And then he brought in his father and mother to acquire an AR in Austin, Texas. So people bring in, you know, one of my our franchisees that has joined us recently here at Loyalty Brands, Dan Roman. I was honored to attend his wedding in about 2002, and I didn't realize at the time that the best man was going to go on and become a great franchisee also. And then they expanded, and then his brother was at the wedding. He came in, and then each of them, his brother brought in some of his friends. And so the growth in Detroit was much related to that first situation where Dan brought in Craig and Dale, who brought in other friends. So yeah, I don't think that, I think you need to work at a place. I've always been blessed that I work at a place that is heartfelt. And I think the franchisees that or the employees that act and think like that are the happiest and the most successful. Oh, you're muted, Bob.
Thank you. If we look at those 3 strategic imperatives and your 10 things on the napkin, the open locations has to do with number 7, giving free franchise and doing other things, because you got to have locations open. And then the happy, successful franchisees are the people who attract other franchisees because they're happy, successful. So why can't I be? So can I be a franchisee? And then that's more locations open. And the third thing, and this is something that a lot of CEOs don't really get either, or they haven't been exposed to it. So I'll say it that way, is the difference between the industry you're in and the business you're in. And you're always real clear that the business you're in is creating fanatical fans. The industry happens to be tax returns. And the way you generate royalty is with more and more fanatical fans who happen to do tax returns that create royalty for your ARs and your franchisees. and you, the franchisor. But those three things to focus on and the way you tie them into strategy and tactics, I think are really things that the CEOs can learn from, whether they're in franchising or not.
Yeah, and I think I promised earlier to give some tips of how to grow an office, not just a national brand, but how to grow an office. And I also mentioned that I was a shameless self-promoter. So let me take you back to when I was with H&R Block and I was promoted to district manager. And I was in Elmira, New York, and they had a flood. And in the flood, it was declared a national disaster area. So there's a special, without getting too complicated, there's a special method of filing if you're in a natural disaster area. The IRS sets up a beneficial way of filing that is helpful. And it's simplistically, the flood was in 1975. And so you are allowed, instead of, it was September of 75. So instead of having to wait until January to take your flood deduction on your tax return, you could immediately file to go back to the 74 return and take your deduction then. So that the taxpayers, the people affected by the flood, would have more money to move more quickly to get back on their feet. So I immediately went to every newspaper, and Elmira, New York's a very small area, and I had about 15 small towns. I had Bath, New York, and Watkins Glen, and Ithaca, and Elmira, and Corning, and Hornell, and Wellsville. So I had all these little cities. They all had newspapers. They all had TV, and they all had radio. So I went in and said, we will amend your tax returns for free. So I ended up winning the national award for having the most press of any district manager in the country out of 500 district managers, because you got a score. You got a point for newspaper, you got 3 points for radio and 5 points for TV. And we, to my knowledge, to my memory, we did not prepare one free tax return. No one came in and took advantage of that. And so it was an opportunity. Of course, we would welcome them to come in. I love doing free tax returns because they come back and pay in the future, and they give referrals. So I have no problem doing the free tax return. And it was doing them in September when we're not busy at all. In the tax industry, we're not busy. I'll give you one more example of how to take advantage of becoming a brand in your neighborhood. Our first office outside of the Virginia Beach area was in Durham, North Carolina. And in March, there was a layoff of 500 employees were laid off by a factory. So we immediately published a press release. We will do free tax returns for anyone that was laid off by this company. So got a nice little article in the paper, in the Raleigh-Durham paper, got two news stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, two of them at night on the 11 o'clock news talked about it. I got a half-hour radio talk show, and we had about 8 or 9 customers that came in and said, that was really nice of you being willing to give free returns to the people laid off. I don't think we had 3. I don't think 3 people came in and had their tax return done for free. I wish all of them would have come in, because again, it's a great strategy. As it's number 9 on the list, it results in benefits to the fact that you get referrals, people come back and pay. We have great statistics on that and great experience with that. And it's one thing that our competitors won't do. But that's kind of where you need to think. You need to think as CEO, whether it's CEO of your one-man show in Timbuktu, or you're running a national company. You need to think how you can get brand name inexpensive. One more thing, and then I'll turn it back to you quick. and this is what a competitor did. And I love this. I don't remember the name of the grocery store, but years ago, must have been 20 years ago, and I was so jealous that I didn't think of something like this. But Philadelphia was going to play Dallas in a playoff game, and so this grocery store they took all the Philadelphia cream cheese off their shelves and said they would not sell Philadelphia cream cheese. They got national publicity on that simple. So, I mean, what did that cost them by taking Philadelphia cream cheese off of their shelves for playoff week?
That's great. You know, one of the things I want to focus on before we're finished today is your distinction between a brand and a well-known company, because the real difference is inherent in the example you gave about the flood. Because a brand is something that people have positive feelings about, whether or not they've ever done business with it, that company. They look forward to the day. Why? I wish they were here. I hope they come here soon. And whenever you can create feelings that people want to do business with you, whether they can or not, you got a brand. No matter how big you are, you've got a brand. When I was a kid, we wanted to drive from Montana down to Denver so we could get Coors beer, because that had a brand that you just, boy, if you could get Coors beer, you'd really be in heaven. And so what someone called a brand is a love mark. When people love you because you create good feelings in them, like Emirates Airlines or whatever it is, if you can get people to believe that you stand for a brand that loves you, the consumer, enough to do things for you that other people wouldn't do, like free tax returns, you're going to create a brand. And people don't take advantage for the most part of that. They want to do what's right. And so you offer it, but they don't take it. But you still offered it.
Yeah, I think we can think of a lot of, when you talk about brands and well-known, we can think of a lot of well-known companies that have suffered dramatically.
Yeah.
Right. And whether it's a Kmart or just a Sears, or Sears once was a brand.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
It was fun. One funny thing to me about Sears is they had the greatest stable I've ever seen of companies that shared space in their locations. They had Caldwell Banker and Dean Witter and one of the large, they had H&R Block, and they sold off all the companies. And the companies today are worth, each of the companies they sold off are worth more than Sears is today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's easy to, you have to be careful, and your brand has to mean something. Like one of our guest speakers at one of our conventions was Harley Davidson, and he drove, they almost destroyed their brand.
Yes, they did.
So you have to, and he came in to speak in front of 2,500 people, and he drove a motorcycle down the aisle and up on the stage, and he talked about the resurgence of the brand. Yeah. And too many CEOs and leaders and executives and whoever they are, private equity, tend to focus on profits and the short term, yeah, and forget about the brand. And we need to be known for the best in market.
That's right. And those three things: location, open, happy, successful franchisees. The fanatical fan one, the third one, is what creates the brand. Because a fanatical fan, by definition, is someone who loves you and likes spending money with you. And then when you can reach that point of having fanatical fans, price is not an issue anymore.
And success is an issue. It's virtually guaranteed once you unless an industry was destroyed for some reason, like COVID, right? That as long as that industry exists, you're always going to be on top as long as you have that relationship with customers.
So if we had a stool to symbolize this call, you could have on the top of the stool the seat, the vision, and then each leg could be one of the three things: locations open, happy, successful franchisees, fanatical fans.
And I want to be careful. I want to include, with happy, successful franchisees, I want to include happy, successful employees too.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
I love, Southwest is a brand. And, I didn't, with your help back in 30 years ago, with your help, with Management 2000's help, and when we were at Jackson Hewitt, it was our early in our relationship, we came up with a mission statement and our mission statement was winning customers for life.
Yep.
Because back in 1991, it was customers number one, customers number one, customers number one. And so we thought that was a pretty good mission statement, winning customers.
Right. Still wonderful.
Right. And then along came Herb Kelleher from Southwest Airlines. And he said, no, if you want your customers to be treated as number one, you got to treat your employees as number one. Yeah. And so that, even though I feel I have been doing that, and that's why I have so much loyalty in my career. It wasn't at the forefront. It wasn't first thought, and that one thing I read in that one book was converted me quickly to, okay, the employees are number one, and treat your employees number one, or your customers aren't going to be treated as number one.
But the one thing that you always did, and you have this in the book, I Compete, that subconsciously and consciously created a great place to work, was your concept and your practice of loyalty. Be loyal first. And that really summarizes creating a great place to work.
I had a conversation recently with, I like the guy, he's a small franchisor, and we had negotiated with over a year trying to merge with him. And finally I said, you move too slow. We can't possibly, I can't wait for you. I can't wait. And so we went on without him and started Ledgers without him. But we still, because I liked him a lot, we still have dinner about every quarter. And I had dinner with him. Last time I had dinner with him, he was lamenting that he couldn't get employees. He couldn't retain employees. He wasn't lamenting about getting them. He was lamenting about retaining them. And I sort of bragged and I said, well, I have people been with me for 4 people 30 years, 3 people 25 years, and 3. Oh, he said, I can get the longer term employees to stay with me, but it's the first time employees and he gave this example, and I was speechless. He said, for example, that we just had employees start a couple months ago, and in the first month she has to take a week's vacation. And to him, he was appalled by that. To him, it was like appalling that someone could do that. And to me, it's part of I always want what's best for people. And if a lot of people, when they start a new job, 6 months ago, they planned a vacation, and that's okay. And you have to treat employees as partners. They're not just employees. And too many executives in this country think of if it was, is an employee partner or an employee slave. Too many think employee slave. They do not think. My belief is that if you're going to be successful, I have to make the employee happy. They have to make me happy, but I got to make them happy too. It's a two-way street. This isn't, I'm the only one that gets them made happy.
But since you're already happy, if you make me happy before I make you happy, you'll be happier.
Could you say that again quickly, like 10 times?
you don't need anybody yet to make you happy. You're already happy. So it's easier for you to make your employees happy. And if they're happy, you become happier.
Yeah, I think happiness is, or attitude starts with being grateful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think our country has fallen prey for lack of gratitude. You know?
No question. And you and I haven't talked about this, but when I was my first year teaching in college, I had a student commit suicide, and I was talking to a psychiatrist who we brought on campus, and the conversation went to, why do people do that? And he said, well, one of the ways that he said, and this is a long time ago, he said that I can tell if someone is tending to go that way is if I give them a blank piece of paper and ask them to write down what they're grateful for. And the fewer things they can write down immediately indicates that there's a tendency that they're going that way. And I think that's a challenge that we could give people today, and even for ourselves, is take the time to write down, if you can write down 25 or 30 things you're grateful for, it might make you happier.
Well, I don't think there's any happiness without gratitude.
I don't either.
But back to building brand and continuing that conversation. So here's another example of my shameless self-promoting. And I encourage people to think like this, because you have to get publicity. You have to get your name out there. This wasn't massive publicity. It was kind of fun. And it was on Facebook or LinkedIn. Well, it was either Facebook or LinkedIn. But you always need to be thinking of how you can get your name out, because most of our brands, all of our brands, are kind of startup brands. We're not number one in any industry yet. And so on our way to number one, we have to get brand name. So if we're in the tax preparation industry and H&R Block is the number one most well-known name, then we have to get as many people know us as know them. And of course, to win, we have to have a greater reputation and greater service. But we're not going to get to there if only a third or a quarter of the people know of us. We can't get to their level. So we have to build that name, and it's so expensive in 2022 to build name in a community. I mean, if you go in, you're in Tucson, it's a small city, right? 100,000 people or whatever. But you need to have everyone in town know who you are. Otherwise, you're not going to be you're unlikely to be the biggest, and you could be the best. It's going to take a long time until you get it. So I had one of my area representatives sent me a note that at the annual convention of FranChoice, which are business brokers that sell franchises for hundreds of different franchise organizations. And 3 of the people that had been with me won awards. So it was Amy Warkamp and Eric Van Horn and Michael Debenham. So this is how I cleverly was shamelessly self-promoted. I said, and they'd all work with me and they're close with me. And so I published online that congratulations for congratulations Amy and Eric and Debenham for dominating the FranChoice Awards. And that's all I did. Well, what I hoped would happen happened. So the first thing that happened, which wasn't what I was hoping, is Amy said, "Thank you, John. Thank you very much." And Eric said, "Thank you very much." And then Michael Debenham said exactly what I wanted to happen. He said, "Thank you, John. I learned everything I know from you." right? So I was hoping for something like that that would be positive, that would build up reputation. And I'm always thinking like that too. And everyone needs to take advantage. Like when to give, and some of that is, I talked about earlier, giving back to the community. When you offer to do free returns for people that are laid off, when you offer to do free amended returns for people that are involved in a flood, giving back is, if you're gonna be great and have great reputation, you need to give back to the community.
Yes, absolutely agree with all that. That's, what a great conversation. Thank you.
How are we doing on time? Well, we have a few more minutes. We can open it up for anyone that has a question for us.
Let's do.
So those of you that are online, if you have a question for us and would like to, easiest thing to do would be get into chat.
All right. Maybe silence is golden.
Well, we have, okay, so Alberto said, so don't get rid of clocks for tenured employees. You know what he means by that? I know. So he told me that story long ago, and long ago at H&R Block, back when I was there, you would get after 25 years, you would get a watch.
Wow.
So a block preparer. Now, Block is known for not being a high-paying company, but they changed that then, because that got a little expensive. So they changed that. After 25 years, you would get a clock. So the clock couldn't have cost $50. I mean, maybe $100. I mean, it was a decent clock, but it was a clock, and it represented 25 years of service.
Wow.
And so some time ago, a decade ago, they got rid of it. They stopped offering that. So they lost a lot of 21, 22, 23, 24-year-old or 23 for experienced preparers, because they wanted to earn a clock. And they had nothing to look forward to. If you're going to take away, they weren't asking for thousands of dollars of bonus, or they just wanted some recognition. Wow. and memorabilia, that I could have this clock. I could go home, and for the rest of my life, I could savor my 25 years represented by a clock.
Wow.
And think about that in how many companies today, and people don't get seniority today in companies. They switch around. Most people switch around. Yeah. And think about what that meant to people, to have a memento, and that showed their great, even if it just showed gratefulness or consistency or dedication, and they took it away and they lost employees.
Wow. Wow. So
next question, let's see, would I still recommend going into different locations offering amendments for free? Yeah, doing free returns has been so successful in the past in my career. I've seen and so much so, and I'm such an advocate, that we require every first-year franchise to do 200 free returns each year, and after your first year to do 100. And people have said to me over the years, can you do too many free returns? And I've gone through the math and showed them that because of, you're going to get somewhere around 33 or 35% that are going to come back the next year and pay you full price based on our historical evidence, because you're going to get 20% of the people referrals based on historical evidence, you're going to make money every time you do a free return. You can't lose money. And in our business, it's very seasonal, and it's even more seasonal than people understand. There's 15 weeks in a tax season. There's only 4 busy weeks. So you have 11 weeks that you can do things like give free returns. It's sort of like a restaurant when they give specials for Monday night, because that's a slow night, or Tuesday, or there's in the past, there's been, they've had certain specials half price. You get half price beer or half price hot dogs or half price dinners. So you need to take advantage of giving back to the community in your slower periods of time. So yes, I've never seen Deborah, I've never seen anyone give too many free returns. Let's see, we have, I guess we have no more questions. So Bob, any final words?
No, I don't. Uncharacteristically, thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyable hour, and we'll talk again next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.